Yes, family, large up yourself. You know what it is. It's your host, Selah, Shalom, coming in on the ones and twos. It's a blood clot vibes. It's a vibe. Yes, family, large up yourself. Pick up yourself, yeah. It's a blood clot vibes. Well, forget them like that. It's the vibes, yes, family. See y'all chiming in. Large up yourself, pick up yourself, yeah. Just getting in. You know what we do around here, family. It's the blood clot vibes. See y'all chiming in. Miles, I see you. Just Smoke, I see you. Giselle, Global Purpose, Eric Hamilton, I see you. Sam coming in. Anita, I see you. KZ Rock, I see you. Ray, what's up? We vibing, family. We vibing, it's a vibe. Positive vibrations. It's a vibes. Make sure to hit the likes when you come in. You know how we do. Getting it early. Getting it early. It's the vibes. But yeah. You know what I mean? We're going to be touching on the cycle of Osiris. We're going to go ahead and touch on Osiris, Osire. And as you know, for those who read the OAHSPE, there is two references to Osire, Osiris, Osire. You have the Osiris that came in the 21st arc cycle, which we're going to be reviewing. And then you had Osiris of Egypt, which came on the scene during the 23rd arc cycle. But we're going to talk about Osiris the first in the 21st arc cycle. 10353 BC to 7053 BC. Roughly 12,000 to 9,000 years ago. Within that arc time period. That's the arc cycle of the 21st. That's the length of the 21st arc cycle. So the Osiris that we're referring to in the OAHSPE, it's referring to an Etherian angel by the name of Osire, Osiris, and he came to the earth during the 21st arc cycle after the creation of man. And that time period is 10353 BC, roughly 12,000 years ago. So this Osiris we're referring to is not the Osiris of Egypt. The same way how I showed when I referenced the cycle of Thor, and I showed that Thor was not referencing the Thor of modern times. Likewise with Apollo, how I showed you that Apollo was not referencing the Apollo of the 8th century BC. Likewise with Osiris. It's not referring to the Osiris of the old kingdom of Middle Egypt, 2700 BC. If we're going further back, and you know, for those who read the OAHSPE know what I'm talking about. And for those who have not, it could be a quite interesting read. So we're going to get into it, you know what I mean? Take a couple more polls, let some more people chime on in, and we're going to get to it. Peace, LaShonda, I see you. It survives, Bronze Yogi Report, I see you, family. China, I see you. Peace to the elder. I see you in the building. It's a vibes. Yes, family. Everybody get into the vibes, yeah? It's a blood clot vibe. Roger, we crazy. Cruz, I see you. Shalom. Shalom Aleichem. Wa Aleichem Shalom. You know what I mean? It's a blood clot vibes. So that's what we're talking on. The cycle of Osiris, the 21st arc cycle, 10,000 years ago. 10,000 BC around that time. Is the cycle of Osiris, and the purpose of Osiris, because like I said, each time an Etherian angel comes to the earth, their whole purpose is to manage, control, and help resurrect man. So the purpose of Osiris, just like the purpose of Thor was to teach men the petroglyphic system of writing, which later on evolved into the script we have today. Then Apollo came to beautify the shape of humans. Now, Osiris, his purpose is to come lay down physical science. Because at the ending of each arc cycle, it goes into a time period of darkness. So when the next archangel come, or Etherian angel come, they have to clean up that darkness before they can start the next arc cycle of 3,000 years. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into the ending of the cycle of Thor, which is the predecessor to the cycle of Osiris. So when Osiris came on the scene in the 21st arc cycle, the ending of the cycle of Thor is taking place. The cycle of Thor was the petroglyphic system, teaching man how to deal with images and arts. And it also was a period where man dealt head-on with the spirits, with the angels. So they wasn't perfecting themselves on a corporeal level, dealing with natural philosophy and science. They was conjuring up and dealing with the communion with spirits. They wanted to deal and be with the spirits more than they wanted to improve themselves on the earth plane. So the purpose of Osiris was to clean up that right there, to clean up the darkness, and also to persuade man's mind back to corporeal knowledge, physical science, because man had drifted away in superstition and belief over actual facts. You dig? So that's what we're going to be getting to with the cycle of Osire. Blessings, sister. I see you. Angela, I see you. Peace and blessings. You dig? So let's go ahead and get into it. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Let me make sure everything. All right. So let me go ahead but before we get started, of course.
Bitter sweet herbals. What it tastes is bitter, but the results are sweet. bittersweetherbals.com. Bitter sweet herbals. What it tastes is bitter, but the results are sweet. bittersweetherbals.com.
Yes, I make sure they get your bitters. You done know. So, all right, let me go to share my screen and get this thing popping. Let me see. Share screen. Boom. All right, let's get it. So here you have it. The cycle of Osiris, the study of physical science, astrology, astronomy, and natural philosophy. And this time period is the 21st arc cycle, 10,353 BC to 7,053 BC, which is roughly 12,000 to 9,000 years ago. And here is the arc cycles, and here is the Earth in its travel during the 21st arc cycle right here. And this is the cycle of Osiris. As you see the Earth, you see the time period, and then come down, you see the cycle of Osiris, and then you see the year, 12,000. So we're 12,000 years ago. This is the time period, roughly 10,353 BC, before the Messiah, before Common Era, I should say. And this is the 21st arc cycle. This is this cycle right here, from here to here. That's this stretched out. So this is the stretch, the length of the 21st arc cycle. Now the 21st arc cycle, the cycle of Osiris, 10,353 BC to 753 BC, 12,000 to 9,000 years ago. And it's interesting that Göbekli Tepe is thriving around this time period. Notice I always could pull up a reference during these arc cycles to show you what humans was doing during these time periods. So that's just interesting how Göbekli Tepe go back to 12,000 years. And coming to what I was saying about the cycle of Osiris, because we know Osiris from Egypt. But when you read the OAHSPE, this Osiris is an Etherian angel that came in the 21st arc cycle. So here's the 21st arc cycle right here, the Ark of Dai, Osiris the first. But then in the 23rd arc cycle, the 23rd arc cycle is 4th millennium BC, the Ark of Spita. This is when the Osiris the false rise up. And it's the reason why we call him Osiris the false, but we'll get to that time period in the further videos. But I'm just showing you that the OAHSPE references Osiris the first, and then you have Osiris the false. And here's that arc cycle stretched out. So you have the 21st arc cycle right here, and then you have the time of Egypt, 2700 BC, the Ark of Spita within this time period. So as we see, the Osiris that we're referring to, that we're going to be reading about, is not the Osiris of Egypt. This Osiris comes much later. I mean, before this Osiris comes before the Osiris we know of Egypt. So now, what is the condition of the condition of the earth and heaven at the end of the cycle of Thor? So that's what we're talking about. The ending of the cycle of Thor, which will be the beginning of the cycle of Osiris. So this is the 20th arc cycle, the cycle of Thor. And like I said, that cycle was to show man the petroglyphic system of writing. But towards the ending of the cycle, the OAHSPE states, towards the ending of the cycle, in the book of Thor, son of Jehovah, chapter 6, verse 13, it states, thus the earth went into great darkness during the last 600 years of the cycle of Thor. This is the last 600 years of the cycle of Thor, from 10,953 BC to 10,353 BC, the earth went into darkness. And this fits in the time period of the Yondish Dryas, the last ice age. So all that is coinciding with the ending of the cycle of Thor, leading into the cycle of Osiris, the 21st arc cycle. So now, let me see here. All right. So now, okay. So this is the conditions of the ending of the cycle of Thor. So when the earth went in great darkness for the last 600 years, these are the conditions of mortals at the ending of the arc cycle. So the Lord's fourth book, chapter 4, verse 22 through 24 states, verse 22. It says, then darkness came upon the races of men. Millions of them returned to a state of savagery. Now keep in mind, this is the same cycle where man was taught the petroglyphic system. He's creating a language of communication. But towards the ending of the cycle, during the time of Dark Age, basically the last 1,000 years of every arc cycle is like the Dark Ages, to put it blunt. Then darkness came upon the races of men. Millions of them returned to a state of savagery. And angels of darkness came upon the earth, taking upon themselves the semblance of corporeal forms, and dwelling with mortals, and engaging in practice about which is unlawful to write or speak. So they were doing some wild shit. so that at the termination of 3,000 years, the lands of the earth were covered with darkness. See that? They're letting you know at the ending of the 3,000 years, this was going on. And Jehovah cast a veil over the face of the sun, and it did not shine brightly for many years. The casting of the veil over the sun, right here, it says Jehovah cast a veil over the face of the sun. This is in reference up here when it states, thus the earth went into great darkness during the last 600 years of the cycle of Osiris. It's referring to that right there when it's talking about casting the veil over the face of the sun. So by casting a veil over the face of the sun, the temperature would drop. That'll cause a decline in temperature. And that's coincided with the Yonder's Dryas. So now, this is the book of Thor, son of Jehovah, chapter 6, verse 11 through 16. Now, I'm reading this to show you the conditions showing you that what were the conditions at the ending of the arc cycle coming up to the cycle of Osiris. So I'm showing you the condition that Osiris had to face when he came in the 21st arc cycle by reading this. Now, verse 1. I have prepared places of darkness in the Etherian firmament and places of light, and my corporeal worlds must travel through them. For so I created them, and these places of darkness and places of light is of seasons for my harvest. So that's Creator letting us know that he has times of light and times of darkness, and we must learn to overcome. We can't always just enjoy the good. We got to learn to deal with the bad too, the trial and error, and overcome it. These are the changes of seasons for my harvest. So here's an example of the earth traveling through these arc cycles of 3,000 years, but within these arc cycles, there's times of periods of light, times of periods of darkness, light, darkness, and so forth. So that's a period of light, a period of darkness, a period of light, and that's how we, as mortals and angels, learn to overcome the dark and light periods. So now the earth passes into darkness, for I fructify the races of men in new corporeal growth for things that shall come afterward, as they absorb from the aja of my place in this age, so also do their souls become full of superstition and darkness. So it's a lot of superstition and darkness going on at this point. Thus, the earth went into great darkness the last 600 years of the cycle of Thor. That's what I just read up here, right here. So this last 600 years, that's what's going on. So this is the conditions that when Osiris comes to the earth, he has to deal with. And again, it states here. It states, and there was no harvest from her for the Etherian heavens, but the spirits deserted Atmospheria in millions upon millions, and went down to the earth to dwell with mortals, and to find places to live on the corporeal earth. So that's what's going on. Fallen angels. Here's the catcher right here. And except to the ions, the light of Jehovah was shut out from men. Thus, ambition for improvement was at an end. They became like drones and vagabonds. And when they died, their spirits continued to lie about in the places of their mortal life. See that? And many of these spirits persuaded mortals to suicide. Look at that. You want to know where the influence of suicide could come from? Guess what? What it states? And many of these spirits persuaded mortals to suicide. And they killed themselves by thousands and tens of thousands. Now keep in mind, all this is going on at the ending of the cycle of Thor. This is what Osiris got to face when he comes on the throne. So again, and many of these spirits persuaded mortals to suicide, and they killed themselves by thousands and tens of thousands, nor were any courage among men to endure anything under the sun. They wanted to be with the spirits of the dead, talk with them, to see them, and to be rid of earthly trials. So that's the catcher right there. That's the catcher right there. This is what Osiris got to deal with when he comes on the scene. He got to deal with mortals that don't want to endure life anymore. They want to be with the spirits of the dead, talk with them, to see them, and to be rid of earthly trials. This is why when Osiris came on the throne, he had to lay down returning back to corporeal knowledge. Because at this point of dealing with spiritual knowledge, they don't want to live no more. They want to be with the spirits of the dead. And this is where the persuasion of suicide comes in at, where it states, and many of these spirits persuaded mortals to suicide. And they killed themselves by the thousands and tens of thousands. Why are they killing themselves? Why? Because look what the mortals say. They wanted to be with the spirits of the dead, to talk with them, to see them, and to be rid of earthly trials. And keep in mind, these angels was manifesting the mortals anyway. So these angels are like, yeah, man, you might as well go ahead and kill yourself and come with us. We showing you right now what's life after death. Look, we talking to you, and we done died. So you're like, oh, man, so you're telling me if I die, we could, and they persuaded mortals to suicide. This is going on at the ending of the cycle of Thor right here. So now, verse 15, neither did the spirits who congregated on the earth have any knowledge of the higher heavens, nor could they impart knowledge as to where they dwelt. Look at that. Nor how they employed their time, for in fact, they did nothing useful for heaven or earth, nor even for themselves. Thus ended the cycle of Thor, and it was 3,200 years. That's the length of the arc cycle. Coming back to here. Or coming back up here. Well, I ain't got the cycle, but you know what I'm saying. I show the arc cycle from the cycle of Thor. So now, this is called the behavior of an arc cycle of 3,000 years. This is what every arc cycle goes through within the 3,000-year period. They go through a new age where new revelation is brought out. Then it goes a time for prosperity and peace of that new revelation. Then it becomes a decline and warfare. And then it comes a dark age of 1,000 years. And then it comes like a renaissance, a rebirth, leading back in to the new age. So that's the behavior of every arc cycle. This is a prophecy of every arc cycle of 2,000 years. So the ending of the end of the cycle of Thor is coinciding with the dark age, the time of darkness. And this is the ending of the cycle of Thor and the beginning of the cycle of Osiris, when he comes down and now got to take control of the earth with these conditions of mortals and angels like that. So who was Osiris? Let's get on that. Who was Osiris? Osiris, he came in the 21st arc cycle after the creation of man, and his time period is 1053 BC. As you see here, they go to Earth, 21st arc cycle, 1053 BC, the cycle of Osiris, which is roughly 12,000 years ago. So this is time period of Osiris, 12,000 years ago. So who is Osiris? Book of Osiris, son of Jehovah. It states right here. To Osire, to Osiris, son of Jehovah, on his throne in Loxin, an Etherian world, where his reign 100,000 years had illuminated many a corporeal star, came the voice of great Jehovah speaking over all, saying, Osire, Osire, Osiris, Osiris, my son, go forth from these immortal worlds and grasp the perishable earth in its debauched flight, and with uplift rod proclaim yourself the one, the commanding God. See that? So Osiris is coming as a commanding God, not a passive sweet motherfucker. He coming commanding shit. As an indulgent father treads softly by his infant son, guiding him tenderly and with wholesome advice, so do my gods and chiefs I have coaxed along the red star for many, many thousands of years. But as a wise father turns to his tyrant son after later years, commanding you shall or you shall not, so now in the same way, through you, my godly son, Osiris, I stretch my hand over the earth and her heavens. Now, I just letting you know who Osiris is. He's an Etherian angel. So he ain't a nigga out of Egypt. This is before Egypt. See what I'm saying? So they letting you know who Osiris is. The same way when I said who was Thor, he was an Etherian angel. The same way I said who was Apollo, all these niggas was Etherian angels stationed in the arc cycles within these arcs as the earth traveled through. They come down and rule over, they come and manage worlds. So now we're going to go into the book of Osiris, son of Jehovah, chapter 11, verse 1 through 28, where here is going to lay down that man shall no longer communicate with spirits and to lead his mind to corporeal and investigate physical things, and restrain him from communicating with the spirits of the dead. Because as you read earlier, that being that man was communicating with the spirits of the dead, he ain't want to live no more. He want to commit suicide. He just want to commune with the spirits, so he's not improving himself on a physical level, on a corporeal level. So now, verse 1. In Asan, Osiris appointed Shaban as god over the delivered hosts, and Shaban selected officers and teachers, and then divided the people into groups and sections according to their development, and then erected schools, nurseries, and factories, and put the inhabitants to work, feasting them aplenty with rites and ceremonies. After Asan was duly organized, Osiris departed and went and sojourned in various kingdoms that had been established by his lords. And all the heavens of the earth were thus organized anew under Osire, being accomplished in 3 years. And Osire spent the remainder of the dawn in Vebrej, perfecting it. This is basically a name of a heavenly kingdom, perfecting it as the central kingdom of Atmospheria. And lastly, he decreed the appointment of 10,000 lords to dwell on earth, some at the temples of worship or at oracles, and some within the cities of the Gans. And he decreed it for his lords as follows. Now keep in mind, the Gans right here, remember I read before, these are the copper color race. These are the brown people. So the Osirian system is going to flourish through the Gans. And here's what they're going to be restricted from. You shall not teach mortals of heavenly things, neither by inspiration nor through the oracles. Now keep in mind, they're coming out of a cycle where they was only dealing with the spirits of the dead. They was only communicating with the spirits of the dead, conjuring up familiar spirits, and the familiar spirits is communicating with them. Some of them convinced them from suicide. So Osiris is laying down laws to not commune with them to stop this from going on, because he's laying down something new. For again, you shall not teach mortals of heavenly things, neither by inspiration nor through the oracles. You shall not let them commune with the spirits of the dead, not even their own kin. You shall not permit spirits to come to their mortal kin, and the spirits of those who die in infancy you shall deliver to the Asafs and Vebraj. And you shall not permit spirits to inhabit deserted houses, nor permit them to form habitations on the graveyard of the earth. Look at that. Look at that. These niggas be forming, some of these spirits of the dead form habitations on the graveyards, on the earth. That's crazy. A couple times I had to go to a couple funerals, and I found the graveyard to be a pleasant place. Like, it was just peaceful. It was just quiet. Especially when you go like deep in the back, it'd be like, wow, that's like, it's weird. But now we know that you could have spirits that have habitations in the graveyard. That's deep. All right. Verse 8, ye shall not permit spirits to inhabit caves or waterfalls on the earth. Ye shall not permit spirits to obsess mortals, nor to speak through them by entrancement, unless they are spirits you appoint. See that? System in order to carry out these my decrees, or unless they are masters of generations, Lewis, whom you shall appoint over mortals for other purposes. So if it ain't coming from this, if it ain't coming from Osiris' decree to communicate, you ain't supposed to be doing it at this particular time. This is what they're laying down. And you shall control the selecting and appointing of guardian spirits over newborn mortals. And all such guardian spirits shall teach their wards nothing of heaven near the earth, but inspire them to believe that it lies far away and very high, from which none return. And the guardians shall also inspire their wards to consult God only, or his lords, and to do this by secret prayer. and that the Lord and God are all goodness and all wisdom and all love and all power. And that evil comes from tetrades, born with man's mortal condition. And you shall inspire your mortals to acquire a knowledge of the sun, moon, and stars, giving names to them, together with their places in the firmament. See that? Now he's directing mortals to study the sun, moon, and stars. Give them temples for observation and tablets for instruction. See that? For in all things you shall direct man's soul to the acquisition of corporeal knowledge, causing him to look into corporeal things to find a reason for the behavior of all created substances. So now they're directing their mind to what? Physical science. They're taking them out to superstition and belief, and it's time to deal with actual facts. And they shall no longer depend in any sense on the spirits for knowledge or truth. See that? For I am not laying the foundation for spiritual knowledge on earth. That must come afterward. So this is going on in the 21st arc cycle, 12,000 years ago, is what he's laying down. This is the beginning of corporeal knowledge, physical science, the Zodiac, astronomy, astrology, all that study is stemming from here. The belief that the sun, moon, and stars are the creators and man was worshiping the sun, moon, and stars, all that is the foundation of the Osirian cycle. Atheists, the belief in atheism, all that stems from the Osirian cycle. Believing in the corporeal only and denying spiritual things, this is the cycle of Osir. For I am not laying the foundation of spiritual knowledge on earth, that must come afterward. For as Jehovah first gave man a corporeal life and then a spiritual life, so am I now laying a foundation for a new race, Gons. Now keep in mind, the Gons are brown and copper colored people. So he's laying a new foundation for the new race, because the new race came on the scene in the cycle of Apollo, where the new race was the copper color race came on. That was evolved, the evolution, 18,000 years ago. Now we 12,000 years down. So now it's talking about, so am I now laying a foundation for a new race, the Gons, with corporeal intelligence and corporeal judgment on the earth. For from their ken, we are the descendants of these people. From their ken shall spring the Heres of Cosmon, which is us, the copper-colored race of today, who shall embrace both corporeal and spiritual knowledge. See that? OAHSPE talking about us. It's prophesizing about us. But these shall rise, meaning those coming up in the 21st arc cycle, believing this Osirian system as it's laid out. That's what it's talking about when it says, but these people of this generation shall rise in corporeal knowledge and go down in it, suffering death in that which I now reign on the earth. Meaning that they're laying down corporeal knowledge to the point where man is not going to believe in life after death, but they must rise and go through it. They setting the tone for the coming generations. You shall teach them in truth, but future generations with contort your teachings into corporeal worship, prostrating themselves before the sun, moon, and stars, going down in disbelief in not only the spiritual life, but in the great spirit and his gods and lords. See that? You have a lot of people today that don't believe in the spiritual life. They don't believe in the gods and lords, but they do believe in the sun, moon, and stars. You have people that do glorify and worship the sun, moon, and stars as they creator, as they God. And all that stems from this cycle, the Osirian cycle. And all these things must come to pass on the corporeal world, nor can there be any resurrection in the later days unless those of this day go through the fall, which I am preparing for them. See that? Because this whole 3,000 years they're going to go through is dealing with nothing but corporeal knowledge. So at the ending of this cycle, they're going to be in total disbelief of spiritual knowledge. They're going to create decrees going against anybody communicating against spiritual knowledge. So at the ending of the cycle of Osiris is the time of Zarathustra, and Zarathustra is coming to prove the life after death. But we're going to get to that in the following presentation. Where we're dealing with the cycle of Osiris now, which is the laying down of physical knowledge, physical science, and the removal of dealing with spirituality, communicating with the spirits of the dead. So verse 23, for which reason you shall find corporeal knowledge in the stars, and name them. For these things will be testimony in Cosmon, present time, of the fate of the worshippers of corporeal knowledge in the time of the Osirian cycle. See that? In this you shall leave nothing undone that can be done, in order to make mortals put aside all spirituality, except to believe in the Great Spirit and distant heaven. Instead, make them pursue knowledge wholly corporeal. See that? For the labor of God and his lords shall not always be to fetch spirits back to earth, to learn of corpora, for this is not Jehovah's plan. A heaven of corporeal knowledge shall be built up, which shall have a base in the firmament of heaven, where spirits can be taught in time to come. See that? So even the spirits of the dead is going to learn corporeal things. Do not fear that man during this period before us can become too unbelieving in spiritual things. For Jehovah requires even perfection in unbelief. Look at that. In certain periods of time, and this is the founding of that on the earth. So look at that. See that? He says even perfection in unbelief. That's deep. So basically, even the Kemetic cats of today who study Kemetic Egypt, they deal with more, even the 5%ers, they deal with the senses. If it's not tangible, they don't deal with it. They call it spooky. They call the unseen spooky. And all that comes from this Osirian cycle, that ideology and concept. Therefore, attend to these matters with all your wisdom and strength, and may the light of Jehovah be with you now and forever. So that's the decree that's set out for man to learn corporeal knowledge and to remove and restrain him from spirituality so he could perfect corporeal knowledge. Now, one of the things that they learned was the Zodiac, and we're going to go into that. Book of Osiris, son of Jehovah, chapter 12, verse 1 through 3, it states, Osire said, Osire, through his mathematicians, now furnished the laws with maps of corporeal stars and the sun belt, Zodiac, or Ankh, and bestowed names of animals upon them, showed the position of the moon, sun, and the earth in it, showed where the region of cows was, the place of bulls, the place of bears, the place of horses, the place of fishes, Pisces, the place of scorpions, the place of sheep, the place of lions, Leo, the place of crabs, the place of death, Sagittarius, the place of life, Gemini, the place of Capricornus, and marked the seasons and made 12 sections to the year, which was the width of the sun's belt. So here they're laying down the Zodiac. So 12,000 years ago, the Zodiac was given to man to learn the corporeal knowledge. This is part of the corporeal knowledge, earthly knowledge. And he placed the sun in the center of the belt and made lines from there to the stars with explanations of the powers of the seasons of all things. Now, what they're laying out is the Zodiac right here. This is 12. I'm just using the image to convey the message. So 12,000 years ago, Osire was laying out the Zodiac to man so he could start getting an understanding of the cosmological order, dealing with astrology and astronomy. So now here is called the Ratnagari petroglyphs. These are if you look this up right here, these are petroglyphs that was found in India 12,000 years ago. 12,000 years ago. And this is a depiction of Pisces constellation right here. This is a depiction coming out of India 12,000 years ago, showing you the constellation or the zodiac of Pisces. See that, the two fish. This is 12,000 years ago now. And here we have another reference of in the same region, in the same petroglyphs, of the Aquarius constellation, where it shows a man and the fish, the water bearer that they be talking about. The age of Aquarius that they be talking about, or the zodiac sign Aquarius. This is it, found 12,000 years ago in India. This is in India. So now, verse 13. And he gave the times of Jehovah, the 400 years of the ancients, and the half times of Dan. Dan equal light. This is what they're talking about. This is the 400 years. Like it states, 400 years of the ancients. This is the 400 years. And the half times is half of 400, which is 200 years. So 200 years, 2 half times make up 400 years. This is what they're talking about. And he gave the times of Jehovah. These are the times of the Creator. This is based off the timetables of prophecy, dealing with these times and half times. And it says the base of prophecy, the variation of 33 years, and the times of 11. These are the variations of 33 years. This is 33 years. These are the variations of 33 years, the times of 11, every 11 years. This is the basis of prophecy. See, we got rules to prophecy that we follow when dealing with how we determine prophecy. We just don't estimate and guess. Oh, the dragon gonna rise up and, the nations now. We got time periods we dealing with. So again, it states, and the 7.5 times of the vortices of the stars, so that the seasons could be what? Foretold. What is foretelling? Prophecy. To forecast, to foretell is to prophesize. So we're telling you that this is the basis of prophecy. This is the real prophecy. This ain't prophecies for the false God. This is how the Creator gives out his prophecies through these cycles. And the 7.5 times. What is 7.5 times? Of the vortices of the stars, so that the seasons could be foretold and famine averted on the earth. What is the 7.5 times? This is the 7.5 times right here. The 7.5 times is an arc cycle of 3,000 years. A half time is 200 years. One time is 400 years. So 7.5 is 7 times and a half, which gives you 3,000. See that? We're dealing with mathematics. So when it states up here, the 7.5 times, this is the 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's the 7 times, which gives you 2,800 years. And the half time is 200 years, which gives you the total of 3,000. And these are the sub-cycle of 400 years within 3,000 years. So we just started a new arc cycle of 3,000 years in 1848. And we within the 200-year marker right here. So 1848, 200 years after that is 2048. That's going to be the first 200 years within the new arc cycle of the Arc of Cosmos. See that? And then we have a whole 3,000 years to go through this arc cycle. So OAHSPE got prophecies. So now, the Lord's 5th book, chapter 6, verse 1 through 35, states, verse 1, God said, in the time of Osiris, your Lord provided for the light and knowledge that had been with the Ions to be merged into the new race, the Gans and the Ahuans, both copper-colored brown race people. This foundation was laid by the Lord and his angels. The Lord provided the inhabitations of the earth with oracle houses in which the Lord could speak face to face with mortals. Now stop right there for a second. You've been taught in the Bible that the Lord is the Most High. In the Bible, it said that the Lord spoke to Moses face to face, spoke to Jacob face to face. But here with proper context, you see that the Lord is not the creator of the OAHSPE, but an angel. So an angel with the title of Lord can speak to mortals face to face. But the Most High Creator, Yahuwah, is not in the image of man to speak to him face to face. Just want to throw that out there. So again, the Lord provided the inhabitations of the earth with oracle houses in which the Lord could speak face to face with mortals through his angels chosen for this purpose. In this manner, the Lord taught mortals. See that? Oral. This is the origin of the oral tradition. The oral tradition literally is when the angels come to you and speak face to face with mortals. So when Jacob was wrestling with the angel, speaking to him face to face, and he, yo, give me your name. It's really an oral. It was an oral face to face communication. He changed me. I'm gonna give you the name Oral, Israel. And the OAHSPE, Israel is really oral, or oralite, or one who receives the information orally instead of writing it down. So again, teaching them about the stars, sun, and moon, showing them how to find the times and seasons of the earth. This is what mortals is learning 12,000 years ago. Here's another example of what they're learning. They're learning basically the Zodiac. Astrology. Verse 6, inspiring them to observe the stars, to name them, which names are preserved to this day. And then we have some of the stars we're familiar with. Big Dipper, Little Dipper, whatever. Ursa Minor, Ursa Minor, Major, Ursa Minor. So again, it states what? In the time of Osiris, the Lord named the stars in heaven after the legendary names of gods and lords. And the Lord did not teach that man should worship them, but that he should learn their glory and majesty in the firmament. See that? Like how we talk about the Orion's belt and all that. This is what man is learning. Now, this time period again that we're talking about is the cycle of Osiris. Right here. So this is 12,000 years ago that we're talking about. Now I have a source right here dealing with Göbekli Tepe. And look what it states. Göbekli Tepe, the world's first astronomical observatory. Interesting that they say this is the first astronomical observatory. And what I just explained was the layout of studying the stars, astronomy and astrology with the Zodiac. And here we have Göbekli Tepe, the world's first astronomical observation. But look at this though. Look what it say right here. Now this is how it looks. This is one of the pictures. Let's go back to the cycle of Osiris. But look what it states here. It states, Earth's northern hemisphere was covered in enormous ice age glacier when a group of hunter-gatherers in south. Now keep in mind, look what it stated. It says Earth's northern hemisphere was covered in enormous ice age glaciers. You remember when we started the segment, I showed you that the last 600 years of the cycle of Thor, the earth went in a great darkness. Jehovah put a veil over the earth, which would create a declining climate, which coincided with the same time period of the Yondas Dryas. So we're dealing with the ending of the ice age coming into the cycle of Osiris. But look what it states. When a group of gather hunters in southern Turkey began constructing the world's first known temple, the site is called Göbekli Tepe, was built roughly what? 12,000 years ago. See that? We're going to stop there. 12,000 years ago. This right here is 12,000 years old, and it's called the world's first astronomical observation. Now, coming back to the OAHSPE, this is the cycle of Osiris, the 21st arc cycle after the creation of man, 10353 BC, and 10353 BC is 12,000 years ago, fitting the exact same time period of what? Göbekli Tepe, the world's first astronomical observation. And this is what Osiris came to lay down. Astronomy, observing the stars, the sun, the moon, the zodiac. And it says, look, the remains of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, it is one of the oldest settlements in the world. Look at that. This shit is in Turkey. And keep in mind, the OAHSPE say the Gons are the ones who's dealing with this. The copper-colored people up in Turkey 12,000 years ago. And then we read about the petroglyphs coming out of India 12,000 years ago as well. Both copper-colored people. See that? It says 12,000 years ago. Roughly was built roughly 12,000 years ago. See that? Coincided with the exact same time period. Look at that. World's first observatory. See that? Observatory. Didn't y'all just say, yo, we're going to be making some observatories for you boys? Huh? What does it say right here? Inspire them to observe the stars. Observe. What does it say right here? Observatory. World's first observatory. What does it say right here they're going to be doing? Inspire them to observe the stars, to name them with the names preserved to this day. See that? OAHSPE got the gems for you niggas. They inspired them to make an observatory 12,000 years ago so they could observe the sun, moon, and stars and give them what? In the time of Osiris, the Lord named the stars in the heavens after legendary names of gods and lords. And the Lord did not teach that man should worship them, but that he should learn their glory and majesty in the firmament. This is 12,000 years ago. We're dealing with the first observatory, astronomical observatory, and this is go Peki Tepe 12,000 years ago, family. See, we always come with some receipts to back up what we're saying. We deal with the spiritual and the physical simultaneously. So check it. But man forgot the Creator because of the wonder of his works. Even to this day, man inclined to view as substantial and real things that are seen, and to reject the all-potent which is unseen. The Osirian cycle laid down the foundation of denying the unseen and only believing in that which you substantially prove in the physical world. And you have many people like that today. You have atheists who don't believe in the spirit. They believe in corporeal knowledge. You have scientists who only believe in the physical world. This foundation that Osiris is laying down produced that train of thought. So again, the verse states, but man forgot the Creator because of the wonder of his works. The wonder of what works? The corporeal knowledge, the physical universe. Even to this day, man inclined to view as substantial and real things that are seen, and to reject the all-potent which is unseen. See that? Verse 15. This was commanded of God, for man to learn corporeal things as well as spiritual. And I, the Lord, carried away the spirits of the dead, not permitting man and angels to communicate together. For they had done this previously, as I started off the verse when I showed you that niggas was committing suicide by the thousands because they wanted to be the spirits of the dead. So they were removing that ideology and getting niggas to get back into physical knowledge. For they had done this previously, and so both had rejected the higher heavens. Verse 16, Jehovah said, it is not the plan of my heavens for the spirits of the dead to remain on the earth forever, engaging in mortal servitude and practices. Verse 17, and behold, the way of my kingdom is upward. Men on the earth shall seek to rise upward, rather than call the angels of heaven downward. See that? Everything is ascension, resurrection. And so the Lord carried away the spirits of the dead, and he turned man's judgment to learning the glories of the lower heavens, meaning corporeal worlds. Corporeal means physical knowledge, periodic table of elements, the pH scale, the electrovibrational frequency. They learn physical knowledge. Verse 19, and man advanced in great learning, both of the sun, moon, and stars, and of all things on the face of the earth. So now they catch it. They're like, oh, okay. The Lord said, "These signs I have given man, so that he may comprehend the cycles of his creator. When spiritual research is chief amongst men, they do not advance in science, art, or invention. That belong to the earth." Take note. "But when man is bereft of spiritual aspiration, he advances in corporeal knowledge and invention and investigation." So take notes. Look what the Creator is saying. Again, this is what the Creator is saying. Take notes. "These signs I have given man, so that he may comprehend the cycle of his Creator." Pay attention. Look what it's saying. I know we all want to be spiritual, but look what it states. It says, "When spiritual research is chief amongst men, they do not advance in science, art, or invention. That belongs to the earth." So let's stop there. When people are advancing spiritually, they're not dealing with science, art, or invention. They just meditating and tapping in. But look what it states. "But when man is bereft of spiritual aspiration, he advanced in corporeal knowledge, invention, and investigation." That's where we're at right now. We're at a balance between spiritual aspiration and corporeal knowledge and advancements. We booming with technology right now. So if we're dealing with, right now, we're dealing with science, we're dealing with arts, we're dealing with inventions, investigations. That's what we're dealing with right now in the arc of Cosmos right now. So that means that we are what? We have become bereft of spiritual aspirations because we advancing in the sciences right now. That's deep. And look what it states. "These signs," what? "Foretell." I told you again, what is foretell? Foretelling is prophecy. "These signs prophesies, foretell the changes being wrought on mortals by the hand of the Almighty through his gods and lords." See that? This is prophecy right here. This verse was a prophetic verse. It's letting you know where you at. If we wasn't advancing in technology, if we were just dealing with spiritual meditations, a group of a nation of people just meditating and doing hums all day, then we'd be advancing spiritually. But we advancing with what? Corporeal knowledge and science. So these are the signs to foretell the change of the Creator and the balance between the two. Verse 24, "I have left these testimonies before you to this day, that the spiritual man inclines to shut himself up in seclusion and prayers, but the Osirians go forth to work manfully." See that? They got the spiritual looking weak, like, oh, them niggas are secluded and shut themselves off. Them some pussy ass niggas or whatever. But with the Osirian nigga, we go out here and work hard, nigga. We go ahead and flip these brick masons. We're gonna build some houses up in the cold, nigga. We strong niggas. So it's like making a cross comparison of shit. So now, verse 25. "In those days, the Lord established reciprocities between kings and queens, and they proceeded in this manner." So this is where the idea of this comes in at. Look, the central kingdom was called the Sun Kingdom. See that? And others were called satellites, and the chief ruler was called the Sun King, or King of the Sun. This is 12,000 years ago now. Egypt, referencing the Sun King and the King of the Sun, the Nasu, that's 3,000 BC. We talking 10,000 BC right now, but it's laying down these kingships back then, right? So again, the central kingdom is called the Sun Kingdom, and the others were called satellites, and the chief ruler was called the Sun King, or King of the Sun. And the king maintained an observatory for determining the times and seasons of the sun, moon, earth, and stars. And the name of the observatory was Temple of the Stars. And then it has right here, this is interesting. The name for it is called OK I Get High. Shout out to my brethren, Yare Yahoo. When he read this, he said, yo, this sounds like it's saying, okay, I get high. And when you look at it, that's exactly what it says. It says, okay, I get high. So this is the temple of stars. Is okay, y'all get high. That's what it's. So the niggas probably blowing some of that good kush, some of that good Indian ganja when they was up there observing them temples of the stars. That's wild. Make sure y'all still rocking out. Bet. Be there. Cool. Now, verse 28. The Lord said to man, build a chamber for God within the temple of the stars. See that? These chambers were places for communication with the angels. So now, seers. Now we're going to go into the seers. We're flatheads, but check this out, right? Verse 29. We're going to get into it. And so man built it, and the Lord chose seers, one for each star chamber. And the seer sat within with a table before him, on which was sprinkled, and which was sand was sprinkled. And the Lord wrote in the sand with his finger the laws of heaven and earth. Look at that now. Pay attention to this. This is 12,000 years ago. This is before Sumer. This is before, long before these time periods. But look what it's saying about the seer. Again, so man built it, and the Lord chose seers, one for every star chamber. And the seer sat within, with the table before him, on which sand was sprinkled. And the Lord wrote in the sand with his finger the laws of heaven and earth. Don't that sound familiar? In your Bible, Exodus 31:18, when God wrote the laws, with the finger of God wrote the laws? Huh? You see what's going on here? And this is an example of the seer. I use pictures to convey the message. So again, it states, and so man built it, and the Lord chose seers, one for each star chamber. And the seer sat within, with the table before him, on which sand was sprinkled. And the Lord wrote in the sand with his finger the laws of heaven and earth. Now, this is going on within the chambers. See what I'm saying? So when I come down to Kemet later on, when I do the Kemetic videos, this is going on within the chambers. It's spirit communion. It just wasn't no niggas talking about no aspect of nature. In them pyramid texts, they're dealing with spirit communion. Just like the OAHSPE is saying here. So now let's go into the seers being flatheads. We're going to get into that. So check it, verse 30. Thus God gave to men the names of the stars and their seasons, and the seasons of the sun, moon, and earth. They got this through the seers. And the seers gave the table to the king, and the king proclaimed its words. See how spirit communication is done? See that? And the seer, what was the seer doing? The seer was receiving what? When they sprinkled sand, was sprinkled over the table, what did the Lord do? The Lord wrote in the sand with his finger the laws of heaven and earth. So while the seer is sitting there with the table with the sprinkled sand, the Lord get the writing. The seer is like, okay. The seer says, all right, what I do next? The seer gave the table to the king who's in charge, and the king proclaimed its word. See that? And God gave man sacred days for feasts and rites and ceremonies, and they were set according to the times of the moon and stars. See that? They learning the sun, moon, and stars, like how we read the moon cycles and all that. This is where they laying it down from 12,000 years ago. See that? So the seers had flatheads. Now check this out. Keep in mind, this is 12,000 years ago we're talking about. Watch this. Now watch this. So we showed you the process of the seers. Now, seers were flatheads in some instances. Now check this out. You know, I always come with a reference and a source of the time period. Look what it states right here. Look what that states. 12,000 years ago, a boy had his skull squashed into a cone shape. It's the oldest evidence of such head shaping. This is a reference of head shaping 12,000 years ago, fitting the time period of Osiris I. And here's an example of the skull. And look what it states here. The skull, known as the skull, hold up, let me get it right. The skull known as M45, the earliest known case of head modification on record. It dates to 12,000 years ago. And guess where the location is? China. See that? You had the modification of head shaping going on 12,000 years ago. See that? Let's see what else. Look what it say. Ancient people in China practiced human head shaping about 12,000 years ago. Long before Egypt. You see the flat heads in Egypt, but this is 12,000 years ago. In China. What is the purpose of flattening the heads? We're going to get to that. But I want to show you a source that 12,000 years ago, they was shaping the head, shaping the skull, compressing the skull. The cone shape, it's what? It's the oldest evidence of such head shaping. And what it say here? What it say here? The skull known as M45, the earliest known case of head modification on record, it dates to about 12,000 years ago. And then it states, ancient people in China practiced human head shaping about 12,000 years ago, meaning they bound some children, maturing skulls, encouraging the heads to grow into elongated ovals, making them the oldest group on record to purposely squash their skulls, a new study finds. Keep that in mind. This is China. This is Japheth we talking about. So now, let's come back to the source. Let's come back here. What is the purpose? What is the purpose of flattening the head? Why are they doing this 12,000 years ago? Keep in mind, all this coincides with being a seer. So now, let's skip up. This is a precept. This is the 22nd arc cycle that I'm reading, that this took place. This is the 20, what I'm about to read is the 22nd arc cycle. This is 7,535. This is 7,503 BC. But where we're at technically, where we're reading from, is the arc cycle previous, the 21st arc cycle. So we are arc cycle later, what I'm about to read, coinciding with being a seer and the process of being a seer. Now check this. This is the Book of Divinity, piece to the God Malachi Maccabee. He brought this out earlier, and it's funny because I had this in my lessons. When I heard it bring it out, I was like, look how things coincide. So now, in the Book of Divinity, in the OAHSPE Bible, Book of Divinity, chapter 11, verse 22, it states, verse 22, So Ahura's emissaries inspired thousands of experiments to be made, by which a prophet or what? A seer could be made amongst the mongrels. And Jehovah allowed them to discover that by what? Pressing down the front of the brain of infants, they could be made capable of suicide. There go your answer right there. This is the purpose of flattening the head. By pressing down the front brain of the infants, they could be made capable of suicide. What is suicide? Suicide is the ability to hear spirits, to see them. See that? And it states what? And infants were strapped on boards, and other boards strapped on the foreheads to compress the head flat. See that? And every day the headboard was restrapped tighter than before, until the forehead, which hold, now here's the catcher. Here's the catcher. until the forehead, which holds the corporeal judgment, was compressed flat, and the judgment of the brain driven into the upper perceiving regions at the top of the head. They telling you the effect of the brain and the purpose of doing this is to commune with the angels. See that? So that's the purpose of it. So let's go down. This is taking place seventh millennium BC. That what I just read is taking place. So we're going another. This is precepts I'm reading to coincide with the seers having flat heads. Now here's another precept to that in the OAHSPE Bible, first book of God, chapter 24, verse 26. It states, "And Atura, the god of evil, taught mortals to flatten the head to make profits." See that? And lo and behold, the land of Gautama became a land of seers and prophets and conjurers, seeking evil for the sake of evil, consulting the spirits of the dead for war, for earthly glory and blood and death. Now, keep in mind, this is a 3,000 years after what I'm reading, but I'm just showing you that they're using, they're flattening the heads of mortals to create seers. See that? Look at that. So again, here's another precept right here. This is in the Book of Wars of Jehovah, chapter 20, verse 17. "From the present, abandon the altar, arks, temples, oracles, and all strongest, most zealous faithists, except those few who still flatten the head and are dull in judgment, who you shall also possess." See that? Now here's another reference coming from, this is the 23rd arc cycle. No, this is 4th millennium BC, a cycle even after that. Now this is 6,000 years from what I'm reading, and it's talking about these flatheads. It said, except those who still flatten the head and are dull in judgment. The reason it's saying that they're dull in judgment because they don't have the frontal lobe. They compress the frontal lobe, and that's where your judgment, your common sense, and all that kicking at. See that? And this is this time period, 4th millennium BC, what we just read up here. So I'm showing you precepts from the coming cycles after the cycle of Osiris, where these seers were made based off compressing and flattening the head. Now, on this precept, this is the same arc cycle, 4th millennium BC, and this is during the time of Abraham. Now, Abraham, the time of Abraham is much older than we thought, according to OAHSPE. It's way earlier, because Abraham's time had the flatheads. And it's talking pre-dynastic. So now it's interesting. The OAHSPE Bible, first book of God, chapter 11, verse 19 to 24. This is the time of, this is the story of Abraham and the OAHSPE, the states. Now we're talking about Africa. In those days in Arabia, which is Africa, was divided into many kingdoms, some having one city and some two, and some as many as 6 cities. And there were constantly at war with one another, and the victors always changed the names of the kingdoms. The largest and most powerful always called itself the Sun Kingdom, after the manner of the Persians. See that? So the Persians had the concept of the Sun Kingdoms before the Egyptians. And before the Egyptians, in the 12,000 years ago, it's laying down the Sun Kingdom and how it operates 12,000 years ago, long before 6,000 years before Egypt. So I'm showing you right here as a precept that these things were reestablished even after the first Osirian cycle. But coming back to the purpose, because I'm reading this because this is dealing with the seership during the time of Abraham, 4th millennium BC. Men and women of learning dwelt in the Sun Kingdom, and they had tablets and books and maps relating to the heavens and earth, and all of which were kept in libraries. And in the summit of this same building was an oracle for consulting the spirits called Lords of Heaven. See that? Check this. For which purpose a man or woman whose head had been flattened in infancy sat by a table covered with sand, and upon which the spirits wrote with the finger of this person communicating with the spirits was called a jinn. See that? The whole jinn concept comes from this, a jinn. Like when they talk about in the Quran, the jinn was a spirit. These are spirits that communicate with angels. These are angels that communicate with mortals for this purpose. They were called ejin in the South Arabian language, and it was next to the Sun King in rank. Now, no matter what war took place, the library and the temple of the oracles and the ejin were sacred and never suffered harm, even between enemies. Now, keep in mind, what I'm reading is 4th millennium BC. This is 6,000 years after Osiris the First. I'm using these as precepts just to show how the seers was being used and were flatheads. This is the story of Abraham now that I'm reading. And the kings kept scribes whose business it was to write and translate and to keep records of the kingdom. Besides these, there were the gatherers of news who held the second rank of the scribes. Now check this. Now, when Abraham and his people came into Arabia, especially into that part later called Egypt, the matter was entered in the records of the different kingdoms, with special reference to Abraham professing to hear the voice of God, for he did not have a flat head. They was aware and they was dealing with the flat head concept during the time of Abraham. But this had to be pre-dynastic Abraham, because we don't find this time period dealing with none of the dynasties of Abraham. Of Egypt, from the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, the New Kingdom. You don't see the flatheads like that. Now you see one of the flathead pharaohs in the New Kingdom, but that's way after the time period of Abraham. So this time period that they're talking about of Abraham, this would have to fall more in the Nakata period, as strange it may sound, because there were no flatheads during the time of Narmer coming down. So it says, for he did not have a flathead, and moreover, he had good judgment of his own, quite unlike the Aegeans in the temple. Because the Aegeans, they didn't exercise judgment, because judgment comes from the frontal lobe. But they compress the frontal lobe, so they only communicate with the spirits. Whatever the spirits tell them, that's what they reveal. They don't have knowledge of themselves. That's the seers. But because Abraham gave no counsel regarding war or earthly gain, he was not favored by any of the kings and allowed to go his way. So that's just another precept dealing with the seers being flatheads. And one more precept to coincide with that last one. Book of Wars Against Jehovah, chapter 21, verse 9, it states, but the majority of the people in Arabia were Ahuans, copper-colored people, being mostly to the Persians in color, size, and figure. For they were also the offsprings of the Ains and the brown earth burrowers, the Hudas, from whom they inherited corporeal greatness, even as the Ains they inherited holiness of spirit. But the flatheads had mostly disappeared from Arabia. So what I just read is showing you that the seers can press their head flat in order to communicate with the spirits, and these seers will communicate with the spirits right down on the table with the salt sprinkled and give the laws given from the Lord to the king, and the king will proclaim it as law throughout the kingdom. And the seers were deeply responsible for these things being done. They were second in rank to the king, like the visors of Egypt. So all this is 12,000 years ago that we're talking about dealing with the seership and all that. You see what I'm saying? So now coming back to the time of, so like what I just read was this time period right here, the 3953 BC. That's what I said, the time of Abraham, 4th millennium BC. And then what I read prior to that was 7th millennium BC. And then we're coming back now, what we're going to read is back to the 10th millennium BC, time of Osiris. So I'm showing you after the Osirian cycle how these seers were being used and how they even had sun kingdoms after the original sun kingdom was set up 12,000 years ago. Now, the Lord's 5th book, chapter 6, verse 32 and 35, it states, and the king, by command of God, caused the people to watch the stars, moon, and sun, so they can know the sacred days. See that? These were commandments by the... So just imagine your whole 9 to 5 going to work is all you got to do is just watch the stars, moon, and sun and keep a track. This is the Osirian cycle. And the Lord said, I have days for planting and days for reaping, days for sailing of ships, and days for males and females by the stars in the firmament And by the moon's change, meaning the moon cycles, man shall learn to know my times and seasons. See that? This was being laid down 12,000 years ago in the cycle of Osir. So man took to learning from the stars, moon, and sun to ascertain the will of God. To ascertain the will of God. You see that? They study in creation now. Before they was only praying on for the spirits for everything. Now they communicating with, they're dealing with the physical science, astronomy, astrology, natural philosophy. Verse 35. And nowhere in all the world did man prosper so great in the Osirian philosophy as he did in Persia and in Japheth, and most of all amongst the Shepherd kings. This is 12,000 years ago we're talking, family. Egypt is only 6,000 years ago. We're talking a whole nother 6 prior to that, that the OAHSPE saying that the Osirian philosophy, niggas prospered greatly in Persia. And when we read earlier about the Egyptians copied the Persian with the Sun Kingdom. So 12,000 years ago, the Persians and the Chinese prospered in this philosophy. Now keep in mind, it says, let me read that again. This is 12,000 years ago. It says, and nowhere in all the world did man prosper so greatly in the Osirian philosophy as he did in Persia and in Japheth. Now keep in mind, Japheth is China. Now keep in mind, we just read that in order for a seer to be a seer, he had to flatten the skull. Now what did this say right here? What did this reference say? 12,000 years ago, a boy had his skull squashed into a cone shape. It's the oldest evidence of such head shaping. And when we look at the skull, and when we read the headline of the skull, it says the skull, known as M45, the earliest known case of what? Head modification on record, and this date is 12,000 years ago. And where was this discovered? It say what? Ancient people in China practiced human head shaping 12,000 years ago. In order to be a seer, you had to do what? The compressing and flattening of the head. This is 12,000 years ago that there was flattening and compressing the head in China, where in the OAHSPE it says that what? Those who prospered greatly among the Osirian cycle philosophy was Persia and China. So we have evidence of Chinese compressing the skull 12,000 years ago. And the purpose of compressing the skull, as we read earlier, was to drive the prophetic. Let me read it. The purpose of flattening the skull. Right here. The purpose of flattening the skull. What? It says what? By pressing. Read that. By pressing down the frontal brain of an infant, they should be made capable of suicide. So let's stop right there. It said by compressing down the front brain of an infant, they could be made capable of suicide. Like I said, suicide is the ability to hear and see angels. This is how you make a seer. This is a seer being made. But look, it says what? The infant, the child. What did this reference say? A boy. See that? These things were done when they were children to compress the skull, creating a flathead. And what was the purpose? What was the purpose? By pressing down the front brain of the infant, they could be made what? Capable of suicide, the ability to hear and see angels. See that? And the infants were strapped on boards, and another board strapped on the forehead to compress the head flat. And every day the headboard was restrapped tighter and tighter than the day before, until the forehead, which holds what? The corporeal judgment, was compressed flat, and the judgment of the brain driven up into the light perceiving regions at the top of the head. This is what they was doing to create what? A seer. And what was the purpose of the seer? What was the purpose of the seer? What was the purpose of the seer? And so man built it, and the Lord chose seers, one of every star chamber, And the seer sat within with the table before him, on which sand was sprinkled. And the Lord wrote in the sand with his finger the laws of heaven and earth. So that was the purpose of the seer. That was the purpose of flattening the skull. And these things were found and done in China 12,000 years ago, coinciding with the time period that the OAHSPE is saying that the Osirian cycle reigned. And it states here that the people who prospered in this cycle were what? Come down to it. Read that right here. Stated what? And now, and nowhere in all the world did man prosper so greatly in the Osirian philosophy as he did in Persia and in Japheth. See that? And I got some literature on Persia during the Ubaid period that they was dealing with the flat skulls. In the Ubaid period, if they're dealing with flat skulls during the Ubaid period, that would put Abraham in the Ubaid period, because that'll be the evidence of the flatheads. So now it said it prospered in Japheth in China. In Persia and China. So we show you evidence in China of the flatheading going on back then, 12,000 years ago. And if one thing I noticed is that the OAHSPE shows that the knowledge came from the east to west. So it came from Asia to India to Persia and then to Egypt. That's what it's showing, how the knowledge came from east to west. So now, the Lord's fifth book, chapter 7, verse 1 through 3. Great became the wisdom of man in that day. What day? 12,000 years ago. And his power and glory were greater than had ever been since the world began. So this is a pinnacle for humans right here, this 12,000 years ago. And he established mighty kingdoms and sub-kingdoms over the lands of Japheth, Shem, Persia, and Arabia, Ham. So Japheth is China, Asia, Shem is India, and Persia is what you know as Persia, and Arabia is Ham, or Africa. And check this now. Like Persia right here is Iran. But look what it says. I got a source. Iran's 12,000-year-old settlement, Maymand. Now let's check this out. Look at this. This is going to the same time period of the time period of Osire. Look what it states. Life continues in Iran, what? 12,000-year settlement. This is the time period of Osire, the first. And look at the evidence of these settlements back then. These are 12,000-year-old settlements we're looking at right here. This is in Iran. See that? Hold up. Look what it states. What it states right here. Maymand is believed to be primary human residence in the Iranian plateau, dating back, what, 12,000 years ago. See, I'm giving you sources from the time period that these things occurred. It is hard to fathom just how long a village like Maymand in Iran has been around. And then it says, Maymand has been providing cozy caves and rock shelters for early inhabitants of the Iranian plateau somewhat 12,000 years ago. And look what it states. The settlement has been continuously inhabited since then, making it one of the oldest Iran's oldest surviving villages. So we're talking about this right here, 12,000 years ago, fit in the very same time period of the cycle of Osire. See that? That shit run deep, yo. They can do it in these are villages in Iran 12,000 years ago. Then the OAHSPE states what? He established mighty kingdoms and sub-kingdoms over the land of Japheth, Shem, Persia, and Arabia. So we're showing you evidence of things that's going coinciding with the time period of the cycle of Osire. And it's the same reference of the kid with the that's this reference right here. This reference right here. So again, verse 12, verse 2. Check this. He excelled in building temples and palaces, and in all manner of inventions, in fabrics of linen and silk. This all going on 12,000 years ago. And wood, fine leather, in writing books and tablets, in mathematics, in laws, reciprocities, in navigation, and in inland travel, and in making what? Thermometers, barometers, magnetic needles, telescopes, and microscopes in chemistry and botany. Botany. They letting you know they doing all this shit 12,000 years ago. That's what's going on. We thinking we just doing these things. They did it 12,000 years ago, long before Egypt, long before Sumer. You see what I'm saying? Coming back to Gotepi right here. Coming back to these niggas. Coming back to what? The world's first astronomical observation coincided with these time periods. To have an observation, they got to have a lot of these chemistry, these magnetic needles and telescopes. They got to have that. And then it states what? Truly the philosophers of those days knew the mysteries of heaven and earth. See that? So by the ending of the cycle of Osiris, within that 3,000 years, them boys had figured it out. They knew the mysteries of heaven and earth. What mysteries? Meaning they knew the periodic table of elements. They knew the science, basically. So again, Book of Osiris, Son of Jehovah, chapter 12, verse 16 to 10. For this rules follow all corporeal worlds, that with the culture of the corporeal senses, man becomes vigorous and strong and independent. And with the culture of spiritual senses and corporeans, they become weak, sensitive, and dependent. See that? On all corporeal worlds, for every race he created, Jehovah has provided these two senses. These two seasons. A season for development of the corporeal senses, and a season for the development of the spiritual senses. To find the mean between these two is to find Cosmon, which lie far in the future, referring to our present time. The balance between the two. Verse 10. But you shall teach them to fear no spirit, Lord or God, teaching them that by their own wills they can cast out the tetrets, which assume to be spirits. Indeed, you shall inspire them to be gods and goddesses themselves. Look at that. Ye are gods. See that? And by their aspiration, they will become large and powerful and of fearless disposition. Book of Osiris, Son of Jehovah, chapter 13 through 5 and 8, verse 5. Osiris said, send for my resurrection, O Jehovah. I have uprooted the evil of idol worship, the extreme that follows too much belief. I have opened man's eyes to your corporeal worlds, and I set a mark on man's soul, so that no more shall man come from earth to heaven saying, Alice, I have no corporeal knowledge. See that? He's stopping that. You're going to come into heaven no one having an understanding of corporeality, because the spiritual world is built up spiritually in the same manner. Jehovah said, to further man's ultimate glory, I have decreed the earth to Jayan fields for 3,000 years, in which your fruit shall have its full growth. So the 3,000 years of Osirian cycle, the earth is going to go through these Jayan fields to further for the growth of man. Osiris, Osire, foresaw, he's prophesizing, the time and place in the future road of the earth and her heavens. The future road, meaning the arc cycles. You see the coming cycles. And that from his decree, which sprang corporeal philosophies. He says the first of the earth. See that? To which men would look back in future ages saying, from there sprang the Osirian system. From there, the Assyrian races. The Assyrians and the Osirian, put it like this. Osiris had dominion over Osiria too. Look at the word Osirian, right here. And look at the word Assyrian. You see the similarity? All we got to do is just switch over a couple of words. Change this change this Y right here. Change that to a I, and change this A to a O, and you got Osirian. So the Assyrians are another extension of the Osiris. Because Osiris had dominion over Egypt and Sumer at one time, which is Persia, or Iraq, or Mesopotamia, I should say. So now, he says what? From there sprang the Osirian system. From there, the Assyrian races. Yet he looked further on, when men would become adulterers in disbelief of spiritual things, doing worship to the sun, moon, and stars, and in every corpor professed to find the cause and foundation of all things. See that? So he's looking to see how what he's laying down in future generations, how it's going to affect them. They're going to deny the spirituality, and they're going to only believe in the tangible, that which they can see, just like the gods, 5%ers. If it ain't tangible to the touch, if it ain't identified through the 5 senses, and if they don't deal with the unseen, it's called spookyism to them. This is an effect of the Osirian cycle. See that? So this is the 23rd arc cycle. This is what he's talking about. He's seeing. He says, when it states here, when it states right here, Osiris foresaw the times and places in the future roadway of heaven and earth. This is the future roadway. This is the 23rd arc cycle. This is what he's seeing, where his philosophy and knowledge will prosper in the coming generations and be re-established in thousands of years later. So now, Jehovah said, man shall search in all things in order to find me. But I give this labor not to one generation of men, nor to those of 100 or 1,000 years, but to cycles. For when I come in Cosmon, present time, to found my kingdom on earth, man shall have the testimony of what? Of all speculations and philosophies before him, which we do, together with their fruits. And he shall judge that which is good by the evidence of past practice. So as we look back, we got the history of all the Kemetic. All the history is before us, and we could judge which prospered and became righteous that we could use today as an example. So these are the footnotes. See that? This is where we at right now. This is the present time. So now, Lord's 5th book, chapter 7, verse 4, 5, 10 to 14, it states, and man grew no longer thankful to God and his lords, but man became conceited. See that? You see how niggas switch up on the gods? Saying, the gods are fools. All things are nature. See that? And of growth. Man became wise in spite of God and his lords. But look what he says. The gods are fool. All things are nature. How many times you hear that? Don't the Kemetic say that, oh, the creator, everything is the aspect of nature? The Netarus are aspects of nature. See that? This is where these things sprang from. And it states again, the gods are fools. All things are nature and of growth. Man became wise in spite of God and his lords. All things evolve into higher states. It is the natural order. See that? Neither is there any all person, Jehovah. He is void like the wind. This is where the denial of spirituality took root, and the only belief in the tangible, the natural order. So it's showing you. So check this. So the kings issued edicts commanding the people to no longer worship God or Lord or Jehovah. Look at that. But woe for the judgment, but affliction for the judgment of the kings and queens. Man having inherent worship in his soul, cease indeed to worship God and his lords, and even Jehovah. But instead, he took to worshiping the stars. See that? They're only worshiping now which they can see. Now the spirits manifesting in the temples advised one thing through one seer and something else through another, for they were of little knowledge and wholly unorganized. So presently, the kings took to war against one another. Anarchy ensured, and here's the catcher, and men fell to destroying all the glories he made. This verse is letting you know this is the reason why we have no evidence of that time period, 12,000 years ago. Why? Why we don't have no evidence? Because man fell to destroying all the glories he had made. See that? You build up some beautiful shit, thousands of years later, y'all niggas going to war and destroying that which was laid. So now when you want to come look for evidence of this time period, it's scarce because man, what? Fell to destroying all the glories he had made. See that? And this is one of the reasons why Egypt was well preserved, because when we get down to the Osiris of Egypt, he didn't take the warlike tactic like some of the Eastern gods did, and that's why you see no real reference in history, because that shit was destroyed. So now, again, man fell to destroying all the glories he made. Thus again, after 3,000 years, man went down in darkness, again fell under the obsession of drudges, and again became barbarians. Now remember when I read the ending of the cycle of Thor, man went through the same conditions. Man went through a dark age and a dark period. And again, at the ending of the cycle of Osiris, we see the same thing. Coming back to, like I was saying, the behavior of an arc cycle of 3,000 years. At the ending of every cycle, there's a period of 1,000 years of darkness, or like a dark age. Now, that's basically, for the most part, the lecture. But here I got a reference. This is a Ratnagara petroglyph coming out of India. These are petroglyphs that are coming out of India that are 12,000 years old. Now, I want you to look at this petroglyph. Look at it carefully, right? You see like these half circles, and then you see what looks like to be a beetle in the middle. And here's another picture of it. It looks like a beetle. And this is 12,000 years ago, to remind you, coming out of India. So I showed you the flathead child coming out of China being the flatheads. Now we in India showing you this particular image. And this coincides with what we know as, well, I'm going to get to it, but here's another image. 12,000 years ago, family, and look what it looks like. A man in the center holding up two animals with his hand. And here, same period, same time period. What do we have here? We have a man in the center with his hands pushing away two animals. 12,000 years ago, coming out of India. I want to stress that. And the evidence of these things, if you want to look it up, they're called the Ratnagara petroglyphs. 12,000-year-old petroglyphs from India. You can look that up. So I ain't making this shit up. So these, now we're going to place these side by side with some images we may know. Cross-reference. Look at that. Egypt is 4,400 years ago. You have Khafre. And if you notice, you see this image looking very similar to Khafre of Egypt, but 12,000 years ago in India. You see the resemblance. Huh? See that? But this is in India. So can I say, oh, well, the Egyptians copied the Indians? No, we're not going to play that game. But I'm just showing you a correlation of what you know is Khafre coming out of India, of Egypt, the beetle god. And here we have a comparison and a semblance of it in India. Not saying that that's what it is, but I'm showing you that it fits closely. Because look, you got the wings coming out the side. Here you got a similarity of the wings coming out the side. In the center, you got the beetle. In the center, you got the beetle head. And then you see the wing disc. You see the half crescent with the sun. Up here, you see the half crescent. In the center, you see the sun. See that? Same thing up here. You see the half crescent and the symbol in the middle. You see the crescent and the symbol in the middle, which looks like the very same symbol of Khafre, but coming 12,000 years ago out of India. So now here go another reference. Like I said before, the man holding up the two animals. This is 12,000 years ago in India, but we see the same comparison coming out of Mesopotamia 1,000 years. See that? See that? You have the Mesopotamian holding up the two animals by their foot or tail, and you see the same thing coming out of India 12,000 years ago, long before Mesopotamia. But you see the comparison of similarity the same way you see the comparison of similarity to Khepere. See that? Now, here's another one. This image is what? The man in the center holding the two goats, like pushing them aside. Where do we see this at? Check this out. Bam. Mohenjo Daro seal depicted a man grappling with two tigers. Now this comes way later. This is Mohenjo's like what, 4th century BC, 4th millennium BC. I mean, this is 12,000 years ago. This is much later. And where also do we see this depiction of a man in the center moving two bulls or two animals with his hands aside? We see it here, and we see it here also. Right here. The Gebel El Erech knife in ancient Abydos in Egypt, 33 to 3200 BC. Look at the resemblance, family. See that? But this is in India we're talking about. See that? It's called the Rat Anga petroglyph. This is coming out of India, and you seeing the same likeness of a man right here. Here go the man in the center. Here go the man in the center. You see him with his hands stretched out, pushing the two bulls away. You see the Shemite or the Shepherd king with his hands out, pushing the bull away. But this is in what? This is in Abydos, Egypt. And then we see it again in Mesopotamia. See that? So the Mesopotamians, the Shepherd kings, was in pre-dynastic Egypt. Because this is in Mesopotamia right here. Look at the features. Look, he's holding up the lions in this one. But then, this is the same Mesopotamia here. But this is an Abydos, same guy, shepherds. These are the Shepherd kings. But look at that. He's pushing out the two lions, and he's in the center. And you see the same semblance, more primitive, doing the exact same thing, coming out of India. So I'm showing you references of things 12,000 years ago that we see semblance of thousands of years after. You see that, family? But that's basically a lesson. That's basically the lesson. Give me your one in the chat if you're getting this understanding. You know what I mean? If you're still rocking with the God. You dig? Let's play some music, because you forever know it's a vibe with the God. You know how we do. Yes, family. It's the blood clot vibes. Give me a one in the chat if you're getting this understanding of the Osirian cycle. You know how we do. Yes, family. So I just wanted to show, right? So I wanted to show that the cycle of Osiris is the 21st arc cycle after the creation of man. We talking 12,000 years ago. And you see 12,000 years ago that Osir laid out astrology, astronomy, and physical science, natural philosophy. And then I showed you a reference to those time periods with the compressing of the skull, flattening the skull going on in China 12,000 years ago. And then I showed you how those who prospered greatly in the Osirian cycle were the Persians and the Chinese, the Japhites, 12,000 years ago. See that? And then I'm showing you relics coming out of India, what has cross comparisons to some Mesopotamian art, Abydos in Egypt, and then being older than India. But older than Egypt coming out of India. So what I'm showing you that during the cycle of Osiris, a lot of the great knowledge was kept in the further east, Persian, China, and Arabia, of course. But if you notice, it says those who prospered greatly under the science were the Persians and the Chinese, and along with the Arabians. And it says of all were the Shepherd kings. I said, damn. So the Shepherd Kings was rocking out 12,000 years ago. So by the time 6,000 years later, by the time we're coming into Egypt as nomadic goat herders, are we going to get to that? We're going to get to how they went from having the first astronomical sighting observatory in Göbekli Tepe, and then them being reduced to sheep herders coming into Egypt. We're going to get to that in the further presentation. You dig? But we have to present. I wanted to present and show you before, because I'm coming down the line to get to Kemet. But I want to show you the precursors of Kemet, how civilizations was going on. And the OAHSPE is showing you these civilizations going on thousands of years before Kemet. See what I'm saying? It's a blood clot vibes. So now, this is the Osirian cycle. The next presentation I'm going to put together is the 22nd arc cycle after the creation of man. And the 22nd arc cycle after the creation of man is the time of Zarathustra. This is when Zarathustra rises upon the scene. And the purpose of Zarathustra, now keep in mind the cycle of Osiris was to get rid of spiritual communication with the spirits of the dead and to turn man's mind inward and start learning science, corporeal knowledge, astrology, astronomy, natural philosophy, and science. So man is going to be focused on that for 3,000 years in the Osirian cycle, the 21st arc cycle. So by the ending of 3,000 years of studying just that, the generations of humans is going to be totally bereft of spirituality. They're not going to believe in it. They already set laws against it. So by the time Zarathustra rolls up on the scene and is raised up, he's living at a time period where you have laws and decrees that go against spiritual communion, communicating with the spirits of the dead, or making any claims about the unseen. They had decrees where you would be put to death if you made a claim that you spoke to an angel or one of the gods spoke to you. There were laws decreeing death behind those things at the ending of the Osirian cycle. So the purpose of bringing up Zarathustra at the new cycle is to reintroduce the fact that there's life after death, because man was totally unbelieving of life after death at the ending of the Osirian cycle, because Osiris laid down physical knowledge and to remove man from having an understanding of spirituality. You dig? It's a vibes. Yes, family. Let's family. Just what me I said, yeah. I see the ones in the chat. I see the family chiming in. Love and light. You dig? It's a blood clot vibes. Yes, family. It's a vibe. So yeah, that's the Osirian cycle. Now keep in mind it's 12,000 years ago. The Osiris of Egypt rose up on the scene 4,000 years ago. So you got 4,000 years compared to 12,000 years. Let me see, son. Let's see if I can pull them screens out. Because it's a blood clot vibes. So for example, right? See that? So what we just read, this time period is the 21st arc cycle right here. 21st arc cycle. The arc of Dai. And this is what we read, Osiris the First. Right? This is 2 arc cycles from Osiris of Egypt. Osiris of Egypt is the 23rd arc cycle, the arc of Spita. And I put Osiris the False. There's a reason for that. We'll get to it. But I'm just showing you the Osiris the False. This is 12,000 years ago. And this is the Osiris of Egypt 4,000 years ago. But it's so when we're dealing with these time periods, we're showing and proving. Like, again, what we just read is this Osiris first 12,000 years ago. This is the Osiris of Egypt. within 4th millennium BC. This is the arc cycle from the arc of Speda to the arc of Bond. Within this time period is the 23rd arc cycle. This is the 21st arc cycle. From this length of time from here to here is the 20. This is what we just read. What we just read is this time period when Osiris laid down the Osirian cycles. So we got this arc cycle, then this arc cycle before we even get to Kemet. Because look, it say 2700 BC. That's the times of the Great Pyramids, Old Kingdom. But here we 10,003 BC dealing with this Osiris who laid down the astrology, astronomy, natural philosophy, and science. So when we get to this Osiris in the 23rd, you're going to see how they reinstituted the knowledge of the Osirian cycle. And it says that in the OAHSPE. And then you had an angel that styled himself Osiris. And this is the Osiris you have in Egypt. But we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that because we got the 22nd arc cycle we got to go through first, and then we're going to get to Kemet. So by the time I get to Kemet, I'm going to just do a run back to show you, like, look, all this shit was going on before Kemet. Even when it talked about, look, 12,000 years ago, a boy had his skull squashed into a cone shape. Here's the skull. We read you the purpose of why they did that, but this is coming out of China. Ancient Chinese people practiced human head shaping around 12,000 years ago. They practiced that shit. OAHSPE is showing you why they practiced that, to produce seers. And some of these greatest seers came out of China and Persia 12,000 years ago. And then you got the world's first astronomical observatory in Turkey 12,000 years ago. See that? Was built roughly 12,000 years ago. Let me show you some more pictures of Gotepi Pepi. However you say that shit. Now look, this is 12,000. All these images is 12,000 years ago. This Gotepi Pepi. This is 12,000 years ago, family. The astronomical observatory, the first astronomical observatory is this. Look at the artifacts. See that? Look at the artifacts. They describe the animals as some of the constellations and things of that nature. But look at the artifacts. Let's skim through. Look at this. This is all 12,000 years ago. See that? Look at them creatures. Look at that. They look like a boar or something like that. And this isn't, like, keep in mind, this is in the land of Turkey. This is Turkey we talking about. So can we say that they carried this knowledge down into Egypt? And keep in mind, the OAHSPE said the people who built up these things were the Gans. Those are the copper-colored races. Brown skin and black people. That's what they saying. Look at that. All this coming out of Turkey 12,000 years ago. Look at this. I don't know what that looked like. That like an alligator, lion, or some type of prehistoric goddamn creature. And then they got the pictures of how it may have looked it. You see what I'm saying? And even in the depiction, you see them building, doing their works 12,000 years ago. So we ain't making this shit up. You know what I mean? We can show cross-reference to the time periods back then. See that? See that? The depictions of the animals, like some duck or some ostrich or some shit like that. And who's to say these are the animals dwelling in Turkey at the time? Look at that. And they say this is the first astro. You know, some people will create their little, you know what I mean, concepts. It's an observatory. Because they didn't found no places of settlement like people lived here. This was an observatory. This is a place where they came to either do rituals. Everything we just read for the most part, because they said they had spirit chambers for the seers. They commanded the people to observe the sun, moon, and stars all day and night. So these could have been observatories for these things. See that? Look, you got the phallus like how they have in Egypt. Back then, 12,000 years ago, you had the female squatting, giving birth. All this 12,000 years ago, yo. See that? So the idea of civilization was going on back then. Somebody had to make these images. Keep in mind, this is in Turkey. This is in Turkey. See that? And some of them, see that? What we just said. This was an observatory. Look what they did. They connected this with the constellations. Look at that. See what they talking about? Gobekli Tepe constellations. See that? Niggas done figured this shit out. So OAHSPE is showing you that 12,000 years ago, the constellations was laid out to men, and here we have a reference to it. I'm not about to go into the details and read all this, but I'm just showing you the references and the sources about these things. Look at that. You got the crab right here. Did we read about the crab? Or Scorpio? Let's go back and find that. Where it said that about Scorpio and the crab. Watch this. Go back to the Zodiac. Right here. What did it say? It says what? The places of crabs. Where we at? Not like a crab, or if it's not a crab, or let's say if it's a scorpion. The places of scorpion. Then you got, if that's the scorpion, either or. See what I'm saying? It's interesting. And I ain't too familiar with these other animals is, but it's just showing you a connection nonetheless. And then look at it. These are the constellations. It says North Star, Ursa Minor, Ursa Major. I showed that further down here when I showed how they was dealing with the constellations. It says what? Inspired them to observe the stars and to name them, which names are preserved to this day. See that? So they're just showing you how they mapped out these things when they're making a connection with Gobekli Tepe 12,000 years ago with the constellations. See that? And it's interesting because why would they consider this a constellation 12,000 years ago and classify it as a astronomical observatory dealing with constellations out the blue, while the OAHSPE is showing you the exact same thing during the time period? Come on, man. You can't find no shit like this coming out the Bible. You see what I'm saying? Gotta respect that, yo. Damn niggas out here busting. See that? More evidence. Look at that. Of a constellation dealing with these things. And remember, so they named them after the animals. That like a bull right there. That like a straight bull. What did it say? The places of what? Bulls. We don't see similarities of crabs, scorpions, and now bulls. What did it say? Bull. Don't that look like a bull? And it's lining up with constellation, whatever constellation it is. They're making a reference to it. See if I find it up here again. Did we see it up here? No, I wasn't up here. But yeah, look at that. That's the constellation of the bull. Mm-hmm. So look how potent the OAHSPE is. For John Newbro to be automatically writing and that shit coinciding with this time period. It says the cow. You know what I mean? And then they put up Hathor and shit. But this long before this. This is Egypt. This Hathor. This long before that. This right here. This bull right here. Wait a minute. Damn, I passed it. This bull right here. This long before Hathor. So now what we gonna say? Oh, the Egyptians stole from the Turkish. See that? That's what we're gonna be saying now. See more concepts of the constellations. You say Capricorn, Ursa Minor. It says the Palladians. Those are gods. It says what? Didn't it say that? It said what? He said what? What did he say? In the time of Osiris, the Lord names the stars in heaven after what? The legendary name of gods and lords. After the legendary names of gods and lords, the names and stars was named. We hear about the Palladian constellation. You got the Draconic constellation and all these other constellations where the gods dwell, son. So I'm showing you and proving to you from the Osirian cycle 12,000 years ago that Osiris came to lay out the constellations, and we see it coincide with those studying the culture, studying this particular culture. They go to Sun and Crescent. Now the Sun and Crescent, this is a symbol of New Year. I understood that because what did the scriptures say? They studied what? They was meant to do what? Inspire them to observe the stars and name them, which names are preserved today. But like this is the crescent, this is the new year, when the crescent moon sitting like a bullhorn in the sunrise or sets. It's really below it, because when the sun goes below the horizon is when you see the crescent. You know what I mean? But of course, they probably have another explanation. Tree, snake, and eagle. Look at that. That damn look like the symbol of the for the Nasut. So that's what we're dealing with, yo. We showing you evidence of the time periods of the cycle of Sa. Give me a one if you're getting that understanding right there. If you're seeing the correlations from 12,000 years ago, the cycle of Osiris coinciding with what we talking about, showing you the evidence. We just not reading from the book, we pulling out sources. And the sources is coinciding with what the subject matter is about. We're dealing with science, astronomy, astrology, and we pulling that out 12,000 years ago, showing you references. Although the references may be scarce because we're talking about 12,000 years ago. And then I read at the ending of the Osirian cycle that man destroyed everything he built up. So it's going to be remnants scattered about here and there. But there's still remnants and proof of what we're talking about. 12,000 years ago, long before Egypt, long before Sumer. Yes, family. It's a blood clot vibes. See what I'm saying? Got to keep in the building. Peace to the queen. You know what I mean? Speedy recovery for mama there. You dig? It's a vibes. That's right. Astronomical signs written in the rock. So even with the petroglyphs, the petroglyphic systems from the cycle of Thor, dealt with the earth and the heavens. So we're showing you a correlation of the petroglyphic system and an extension from the cycle of Thor coming down to the cycle of Osire, still in use, now referencing constellations and astronomy, astrology, to the petroglyphic system. Now keep in mind, the petroglyphic systems are the precursors of what's going to later become the hieroglyphic systems, the Paleo-Hebrew systems. All those systems is precursors of the petroglyphic systems. That's why I did the cycle of Thor to show the petroglyphic systems, the precursors of writing. See? Like for example, these are the petroglyphs of what I just showed you, and I did the cross comparison out of Egypt. These are the petroglyphs. See what it say here? You just put this in right here in your Google search, and then this was going to come up. What I showed you earlier, with the beetle looking like Khepere of Egypt, with the man holding the two animals by their tail, which resembles the Gabel Eagle knife in Abydos, Egypt, and Assyria. But these is the petroglyphics of India. This is in India now. This is in India. Go Tepe Pepe was in Turkey. So let me show you. Let me show you the locations of these areas. Let me see if I can get a map of the area. All right, Rome, right here. See that? Look, 12,000-year-old petroglyphs in India depicted sacred symbols of global importance. This is over here. Look at that. See if I can find it. But look at the symbols. 9,000-year-old petroglyph in India, and they showing you a German imperial eagle, showing you a cross comparison. So we're showing you that the knowledge was in the east and came westward. That's what I showed y'all right there. See that? These are the petroglyphic systems coming out of India. Let me see if I can figure out if this is a location. We're trying to India. All right, so this is where the location is, right here. This is the area where those artifacts were found. 12,000 years ago, long before Egypt. See that? And then you got those you got the boy shit coming out of China. See the ancient practice of China with the head shaping going back 12,000 years ago. This is the location that they found it. Let's see how this looking on the map. See the areas where they was at pre-China. Look at that. This where they at. I wonder if I can get a but this is where they at in China. 12,000 years ago, that's where that skull was found. All right, bet. Here we go. That's a better map. Do they? Yeah, what's the name of that place again? JL Providence. Oh. Start with an H. Let me see if we can find it on here. Let me go when I can have a location. This is China now. This is the area where they found the skull with the boys at. Up in here now, 12,000 years ago. Look at the distance from this place to where Egypt and Africa at. But this was going on 12,000 years ago with the flattening of the heads. And then we have in India, over here in this location of India, you got them over here with these petroglyphic systems. that coincide looking like some of the systems some of the petroglyphs you see in India, in Mesopotamia. So they over here in China flattening skulls to create seers. And then over here, they got them petroglyphs all over the place. So this shit, you know what I mean? They showing you where this shit popping off. And the first observatory over here, this is in Turkey. Götepe in Turkey. See that? Götepe in Turkey. We ain't nowhere near the continent. Ain't none of this shit going on in Africa. They showing you ancient cities long before Egypt. Long before things going on as far as what we consider the Egyptian and Sumerian civilizations. That came much later. Let me see if I could put a map. So you can see the location of where it sit on the map. So look at that. This is where it's at. This is Götepe. This is where this at. See that? This is where this at, but this is where it's at on the map. But look below it. What's below there? Syria. What's below Syria? Canaan and them boys. What's below Canaan and them boys? The Giza Strip. So who's to say the knowledge didn't come from down here? See that? And we talking 12,000 years ago. Narmer is 3003 BC, 4th millennium BC. 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. Long before. Long after, I mean. So that's going on in Turkey, Götepe Pepe. And then you got in India, the petroglyphs. You got the first astronomical site in India. In Turkey. Then you got the petroglyphs depicting similar symbols you could find in Egypt and Mesopotamia. And then you got in China, way up here, they compressing skulls, which we know now to create seers for the Sun King. All 12,000 years before what we know as ancient Sumerian and ancient Kemetic civilizations. It's a vibe with that, ain't it? We got a vibe on that one. We got a vibe on that one. It's a blood clot vibes. Blessed vibes, Mr. Shrimp. Love and light, yeah. It's the blood clot vibes, yeah, we vibing now. That was the lesson, so we just gonna vibe out with some music, you know how we do. You know what I mean? You can light up and turn up your spliff. Cause it's the blood clot vibes. Run the rhythm. It's the vibes. Yeah, so hopefully I got some understanding on the cycle of Osiris. We got some insight what was going on 12,000 years ago. You know what I mean? Osiris came to lay down the Osirian system. You know what I'm saying? So the next arc cycle is going to go into is going to be the time of Zarathustra and the Persian king. Because see, one of the biggest arguments was that which came first, Egypt or Sumer? Mesopotamia, that's the far west of Persia. So the OAHSPE states that Persia had the Sun King, and then that shit migrated to Egypt. And then in the OAHSPE, during the time of Egypt, it states how basically Mesopotamians migrated into what we know as Lower Egypt. And they're the ones who established the dynasties of Egypt in that area. So the argument of the Egyptians being native Nubians in comparison to these Egyptians who was Asiatics is crazy. The OAHSPE say that the Asiatics were the ones who came in and occupied Egypt. And I'm talking about pre-dynastic Egypt, like Narmer, right? When Narmer was fighting them dudes or whatever, it could have been some of them cats. That's interesting nonetheless. You dig? It's a blood clot vibes. Yeah, so we just vibing out, fam. You know how we do. You know how we do. But for the most part, that was the lesson. I really wanted to come and just drop that lesson, keep the presentation tight. I don't want to drag too long. So with that, we're gonna rock out. We're gonna let the music rock out. You know what I mean? Make sure to get your bittersweet herbals. Let me run the message one more time.
Bittersweet herbals. What it tastes is bitter, but the results are sweet. Bittersweetherbals.com.
Yes, family, make sure to get your bitters, you dig? Make sure to get your bitters. And with that, you already know your boy Selah Shalom is gonna sign up out of here, and we out of here till next time. Peace, love, and life, family. Salute. It's a vibes.